All right, everybody, welcome into episode 154 of the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. My guest on the show today is my buddy, Jeff Gargas. Now, if you don't know Jeff, let me tell you this. Jeff is currently the COO and co-founder of the Teach Better team. They are the creators of teachbetter.com, the Grid Method, and Teach Further. Jeff is also the co-author of the book, Teach Better. He and his team work with schools and school districts to increase student engagement and improve student success. At Teach Better, Jeff's work is leading the EDUcreator Club Plus community, which is a space that is built for educators who create things outside of their classroom, outside of their school. Through Jeff's one-on-one coaching and his masterminds, Jeff has helped dozens of edupreneurs. Yeah, that's right. Edupreneurs, educators who are entrepreneurs, grow six-figure businesses. I am one of those individuals. I have been working with Jeff for several years now. He's not only my coach, he's not only my biggest cheerleader in my corner, but he's also somebody who has helped me to define the work, to be a lot clearer about what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And honestly, he's that person that I can go to when I have a question or an idea or a thought around all things content marketing, around all things small business, and around all things entrepreneurship. Jeff has a really powerful story. He has a really interesting backstory that not too many people know, but he does a great job of sharing it here on this episode. And I know you're going to love it, folks. Man, this one's just so much fun. And I know you're going to love it, and you're going to get it all right after this. Those of you who listen to the show on a regular basis know that I believe very strongly in coaching. And not just because I'm a leadership coach, but because a coach made such a difference in helping me to get it figured out as a leader. So when I transitioned from my superintendent role into what I do now on a full-time basis, it should be no surprise to any of you that, of course, I have enlisted the support of a coach. And in a very interesting and unique way, and I think we'll probably get to the story at some point during our conversation, Jeff Gargas has served in many ways as that coach, that mentor, that confidant, that dude, what the hell are you doing kind of person for me. So I'm excited to have Jeff on the show today. Man, thanks so much for joining me.
Man, making me tear up a little bit over here. I appreciate those kind words. I'm excited to be here, man. We've been trying to plan this for a little bit, so it's exciting to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been interesting. We've bounced this one forward on the calendar several times. So I made a commitment this week to have this done, and here we are getting it done. So I'm very happy about that. So Jeff, let's do this before we dive in too far. For the listeners who maybe don't know as much about you, certainly as I do, let's jump in the Wayback Machine and go back as far as you want, and just, I guess, orient us a little bit on your journey.
Ooh. All right. I am not good at short, as you know, so I'll do my best here. But, so my name is Jeff Gargas, and I, about 9 years ago now, co-founded a company called Teach Better team that I now co-own with Chad Ostrowski and Ray Hewitt. And we've got an amazing team. I get to operate as our COO, kind of in operations type of things, which means I get to wear a lot of hats, as anyone who has a small business knows. That's how it works. It's been a weird and crazy road getting here, and a whole bunch of different things that I've done. I've started a lot of businesses over the last 20 something years, and a variety of things, including opening a couple restaurants and concert clubs, putting on conferences that are outside of education, starting a record label, doing promotions in the world of music, and working in the worlds of like fast food and restaurants and all kinds of stuff. And oddly enough, as someone who is part of a team that works with educators all over the world, I was never a teacher, and actually was a multiple time college dropout, which is always a fun story to tell. But did teach college for a couple of years as well. So it's been kind of this crazy road to get here. And a fun fact that a lot of people might not know, Darrin, I think you know this one, is that Chad, how we actually met was that I actually managed his band back in the day. He was a really talented drummer in a rock band, and that's how we got to know each other. Then kind of went different ways, and he became a teacher, and I started an online marketing firm. And 9 years ago, a little over 9 years ago, he comes to me and says, "Hey, I have this idea, this thing that we now call the Grid Method," and we started going. And then Ray joins and changes the way we look at things and the way we do things, and we start expanding and eventually become Teach Better. And here we are, crazy road later. So
Yeah,
that's my best short. I think that's the
absolutely.
best I've ever done that.
That actually was
Short,
really
short.
good. Yeah. Yeah.
Really
Knowing
short.
you like I do, that was easily the shortest answer you could have put forward for
Yeah.
us. So, which is good because we can get into even more stuff. And one of the things I want to chase there just a little bit. Well, one of the things I really want to chase is the fact that Chad was a drummer. I did know that you had. Yeah, I knew you had managed his band. I did not know he was a drummer, and that makes so much sense. It really does. He has the
Very good drummer.
personality, and yeah, I can totally see that. But that isn't really the thing I want to chase after. I do want to have you maybe talk just a little bit more about kind of. I know some of the story, but I think it's very important for others to hear the story of how Chad came to you with the grid method, and just thinking it was like it is something really small, and obviously it's become quite a bit bigger than that. And before you do that, I want to say this. A big part of wanting to have this conversation with you on the podcast, there are so many educators who want to start something. They think they have something. They're just not sure how to do it. We'll talk about the Educator Club, Creator Club in a little bit. See, I told you I wouldn't get it right. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I think for every one of you that is listening right now who at some point have had an idea or a thought or, ooh, I'd like to do that, but you think, no, maybe that's not it. Or Chad had the ultimate way underselling what he had that launched where you guys are. So that's a really big buildup. Really, quite the setup there. I know that's a shock coming from me, but now I'll give you the opportunity. Maybe expand a little bit and talk a bit more about that.
Sure.
How that went down.
Yeah, and I think if I'll speaking on of kind of off what you just said, first and foremost is one, I actually, I was just in a conference when it was a week or so ago in Arkansas, and one of the sessions that I do is the increasing your impact through sharing your story. So if you're listening, you're one of those people that Darrin just talked about that you think you have something, there's a really good chance that you do. I'm definitely someone who believes that you most likely do. And I think, getting into the story of Chad, and I kind of mentioned that like Ray came on, then eventually we became the Teach Better, because initially we just called everything was the grid method, gridmethod.com. That's what it was. And that actually comes from, so Chad's story is Chad was a 7th grade science teacher in Ohio and loved what he did, was good at it, but had a couple of rough years and had one really, really, really bad year where students just there was no accountability. They weren't engaged. They were struggling. Therefore, he was struggling. Classroom management, just everything piling up. And Chad essentially got to the end of the year and said, hey, I either got to figure out how to do this thing better or I need to quit. And it kind of went in and dug into the research and the data that seemed to all be pointing to mastery learning, personalized learning, student-paced, self-paced, and standards-focused learning and structures that were proven by the research to solve his problems. And so what he couldn't find was a way to put it all together. So he created this thing that we now call the grid method. Back then it was just like how Chad decided to run his classroom and survive. And then sort of getting into his undersell is like, what happened is some of the other teachers started noticing that particular student seemed to be doing well in Chad's, but not in mine. So they started asking questions, and a few other ones reached out with other different questions. And his principal started noticing, actually telling people like, hey, go look at what, Coach Ostrowski's doing. And then one of the things that really hit him was that a mentor of his, who was the 8th grade science teacher, came down and was like, hey, what are you doing down here? Because I just spent like half my classroom with my students telling me that I wasn't teaching right and I know how to teach. And Chad sharing it to him, and him giving Chad the like, hey, this makes a lot of sense. I'm going to try it too. Who he then did and is a big component of it. But like that got Chad to the point where he got a little more confident in the fact that, okay, this is something that I should share with my colleagues, and got to the point where essentially he was kind of getting stuck in a hall a lot, talking to people and sharing things, all good things. And he reached out to me. At this point, I was running an online marketing firm that I had started, working with businesses, doing website design, SEO, social media, content marketing, all that stuff. And we had stayed in touch, but we hadn't talked much for a little while just because life. And he reached out and said, hey, like, I think can you help me put together an ebook? This was a time where like ebooks were still somewhat new. And I'm sure. And he told me all about it. We ended up meeting, and sort of the joke in famous words in our companies that I said, dude, we're not just doing an ebook. So I think there's something here. We need to share it. We need to do more. And he agreed. And we created an online course, and we started creating content, and we just started growing it there. And so while I think Chad probably had a undersell to me because he was just thinking just ebook. He wasn't thinking big enough. I think at that point, he definitely had the confidence because he had seen it work with the kids. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you are listening to this and you are seeing something you do work with kids, no matter how big or small you think it might be, if it's doing positive things to kids, it's probably worth sharing in some way or another. Like that's typically the message that I try to push. Whether you share that and then make money off it, that's your decision, and we can have a conversation there. But like at the very least, it's worth putting it out there. One of the things we say on the team all the time is that for every problem there is in a classroom or school somewhere, there's a solution in another classroom or another school, and it just hasn't been shared yet. And that's sort of where we base everything off of. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big believer in the power of connection and the importance of relationships. And it's very difficult to connect the solution with the problem if people aren't putting it out there and they're not working to build those relationships or to just simply get what they're doing out there. The how you get it out there. Let's talk about that just a little bit, because certainly, content marketing and, that type of thing is something a lot about. You've got a lot of expertise there. You've taught me a lot. I still have a lot more to learn, without question. But if somebody were starting out right now, if somebody was like, I've got this idea for fill in the blank, what are some suggestions you would give to them that they can do from their home office or their kitchen table or whatever? They're still doing their full-time gig. They're just starting the side hustle. What are some steps you would suggest?
I think so. There's kind of two that go side by side. One is to just start creating content, whether that is making TikToks, Instagram Reels, tweets out on X or whatever we call them now, LinkedIn posts or blog posts or a podcast or anything. Just start creating content and sharing things out. Because if you don't know the second part, then that'll help you figure that second part out. Because the other second part that kind of goes along with that is trying to figure out, like, if you have this idea and you think you want to turn it into something, but you're not sure, like going through the process of figuring out what I usually refer to as a sweet spot. That's not my thing. I got it from someone that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's thinking about what am I good at? What am I passionate about? And who can I help? And figuring out, like, okay, what is something that I'm good at? That's that thing that you're probably thinking about sharing. What are you passionate about? Well, that might be connected to that thing, or maybe it's a bigger umbrella. And then who can you help? Right. And this is all a process of getting to, well, who should you be talking to? And by that, I mean, creating your content for. Who am I trying to speak to, right? And then create your content around that and thinking through what problems are those folks having, whether I'm talking about second grade teachers or seventh grade math teachers or, district leadership or even anything outside of education, whatever it might be. Creating your content to share value with them and speak to them so that you start to understand them better, because you're going to get interaction on that, so that you're also then building yourself as authority, and that builds into a whole bunch of other stuff that I'm not going to go into yet unless you take us there. But the first thing I would do is just start creating content. And the next question, if I may, is typically, well, where and how much? The where is wherever you think you can do it best. So if you're a writer, if you like to write, think about starting a blog or creating threads on Twitter or write and post on LinkedIn. If you're more of a get in front of the camera and have some fun like that, or feel more comfortable with that, or don't like to type and write and just like to go off the cuff, then maybe, whether it's YouTube videos or just doing short form stuff on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels or whatever, that might be the way to go. If you're great with design, maybe just like Instagram in general is going to be the way to go. If you're just like to get on a mic and go, then a podcast, right? But find your way of doing it. And the answer to and I know you know this one, the answer to how much you should create is consistently, whatever that means. If that's once a month, then it's once a month. If that's once a day, then it's once a day. But just start creating stuff, because what you'll find is as you start putting yourself out there and engaging with people around content that you're sharing or ideas that you're sharing, is a lot of the other questions of like what I should be doing or what I should be creating, or should I try to sell this, or could I sell this, or any of that stuff is going to start to come to you and answer itself. Now, that doesn't mean you should be putting things in place to listen and make decisions, but it all starts with that. So start creating content. Worst case scenario, you do it for a while, you help some folks, and you decide it's not right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you hit on, man, you hit on a handful of things there that are certainly lessons that I've learned over the last few years doing this work. Definitely just show up as consistently as you can, whatever that number is. Just make sure that you're consistent with it. I think that's really, really big. But something that you kind of touched on, but I want to maybe take it just a step deeper because I think this is something that many content creators, or maybe people who, I don't want to say wannabe because that has a negative connotation, but maybe emerging
Aspiring?
content creators, I'll use that word, mistake that they might make is, well, I'm going to post everything on X, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitter is X again, whatever. Talk about an identity crisis. Come on, Musk, make a decision. But anyway, so across all platforms, is that the right move? Let's say I create a video. Do I put it across all platforms the same way? Should I be making different designs for each one? Should I lean into a certain space? What would your recommendation be there?
So if you can, first and foremost, what I say does not mean it's right for you. It's only right. You got to dig into yours. But like, I think in general, if you can put it across all, great. Sounds awesome. Most people cannot. That's really hard to do. But you might be really great at creating content. And if you're using tools and AI and general, you might be able to do that. But I would definitely not recommend that to start. I think the key is sort of harking back to what I did say about like what do you generate the easiest, right? What comes naturally to you. That can help you figure out where you should go. I typically will recommend someone brand new. I'll be like, look, think of one or two platforms and go there, right? So maybe that's, well, I'm going to do a Facebook page and an X, or maybe I'm going to do Instagram and TikTok or whatever, right? So think about that. Now, part of that you can include in the equation can also be, well, maybe you go, oh, I kind of like doing everything. I like writing, I like creating audio, I like creating video, and I have fun on all the platforms already from a consumer standpoint. So I kind of like all of them. Okay, well, then maybe you look at, okay, who are you trying to talk to? I'm trying to talk to leaders. I'm trying to talk to elementary. I'm trying to talk to whatever. Then that might take some research of like, okay, where are they typically at? Well, looks like the data says that the majority of people I'm trying to talk to are on Facebook. So maybe I'll focus on Facebook as one of my platforms. Right. And then, or no, well, maybe it's this and I need to focus on LinkedIn. So it's a combination of those things. I think 1 to 2 is all the further I would go, at least to start, because you'll find that starting it is usually the easy part. It's the sticking with it that becomes harder, especially as if you're still in a classroom or in your leadership role, whatever it might be. Like that's a hard balance of, you never know when the rest of things in your life are going to make it really hard to stay consistent. And it's just easier to add later on than it is to take away. Because having like let's say a Twitter account that gets started and lays dormant for a year is actually more negative than the positive that it initially started out as. So focusing on that, what can I do consistently? What can I do easily and more naturally? And 1 to 2. It's okay to just be one. Be like, hey, look, I'm just a Facebook person, and that's fine. I'm just on LinkedIn. Like, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Well, and I think you hit it really well there. When you figure out specifically who you're talking to, and part of that I think is being really clear about what problem you're trying to solve. If you're trying to solve a problem for classroom teachers, but your primary target audience are district administrators, you're probably missing the boat. Not that you shouldn't still be targeting the decision makers, the ones who actually would try to hire you if that's what you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, identifying what I'm trying to solve and who is the end user of that, and being able to market to them. I know that's something interesting with Teach Better. So for me, obviously, with the leadership speaking, the leadership coaching, all of that, my primary target audience are district level administrators and school level administrators. That's who I'm really, really targeting. And so I know where they are. That's where I'm showing up. The Teach Better model, I just think, is so interesting. And so I'd like you to talk about it a little bit. Your primary marketing goes to teachers, but teachers aren't the ones who write the checks. So but they're the ones who are the end user, at least of the grid method, the primary flagship item for Teach Better. So talk a little bit about that. I mean, I've heard you talk about it, but I know that it's something very worthy of being shared with the audience.
Yeah, and teachers are the users of like most of what we do. Now we do strategic planning and stuff like that. That's more of a district level communication, but we built everything on things like the grid method, like the Teach Further model, like classroom management, all that stuff. So you're right. And I don't know that I'm the first person to say this or realize it, but so I don't know that this is a me thing or if I picked it up somewhere, but I refer to it a lot of times as like the Toys R Us model, which is a terrible way to describe it since they're like out of business in the United States, but
Yeah.
bear with me on this. Follow me here. Is if you think about Toys R Us, and they're not the only ones, a lot of companies do this. Toys R Us marketed their toys to the kids, to young kids who clearly don't have any money to buy their product. But the goal was if they market to this kid and they want it, they're going to pull on mom's pant leg and say, hey, mommy, buy this for me. And that was sort of their model. That's sort of the approach that we took. In this scenario, our kids in that scenario are the teachers, right? So we marketed to the teachers with the hopes, the goals, the plan of them saying, hey, I like this, either this thing and or this team and this site and this resource or whatever. Hey, administrator, we should look at this. And that's how we've built our business. And that's a process. And I know I've shared this in rooms with you before. Like that's a process that takes a longer process, right? Because you have to build up that trust and that what's the word I'm looking for? That trust and that authority and that love, whatever, from, amongst either a classroom teacher that happens to have the ear of the right person and or a group that make it so big that they have to listen type of a thing. Takes more time than if we were to go directly to. We like it because we think it builds it built the brand that we wanted to focus on, the way we want to do it. When we first launched everything, we said everything free for teachers. We do have stuff now that they can buy, but for most part, things are free for the teachers. We're happy to take money from the district, like, right? That type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that is how we did that. And I always try to talk, when I talk about this, and I always say like that doesn't necessarily, one, it takes a long time to be like, that's a thing, but also that doesn't necessarily mean that that's how you have to do it. It doesn't make it the right way. It's just how we did it. Now, in the last 2-3 years, we have shifted. We have more things that target specifically to leadership and to district level folks and building level folks, because we wanted to support them. We feel like we built a strong enough brand that teachers and educators, classroom teachers, know that we are there for them no matter what. So we do have things that are more direct. We also found a niche in our ability to have those strategic conversations and much larger conversations. And that became like more of a product that we sell straight, to the district level instead. And so it's worked well. It's been a kind of a cool sort of, I don't want to say transition, but like just morphing and change and evolution, I guess is the right word, of how we approach things, while always continuing to try and do as much as possible free for educators as well.
But I think it ultimately comes down to how your company has evolved over time. You mentioned it in passing there, but one of the offerings that, and actually it's the how I got connected, I think, with Teach Better the first time, was the Administrator Mastermind. Mm-hmm. And certainly during the pandemic stretch, I was a superintendent at the time, and I'm not sure how I first found the mastermind. Might have been Dave Schmittou. That's who I think it was that invited me in.
Yep.
But making that connection, that was kind of my first connection with Teach Better, and so now obviously, however far that is, 4 years away or whatever down the road, I've certainly seen a lot of things evolve in your business, and certainly seen you guys, go through a lot of growth and a lot of adaptation and change. And what I see, and I'm leading into the EDUcreator Club, got it right that time, a little bit here with this question, but over time, you guys have grown from just being about the grid method to now lots of different opportunities, solutions, and I think in some ways, even just like you said, for the budding, early entrepreneur, you guys each lean into things that you're passionate about and that you're really good at, and you've found ways to support educators in just so many unique ways. So maybe just kind of talk about that process, you and Ray and Chad and Josh, and just how this has grown to what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that question. And it is something that's one of the things I think I love most about our business and our team. And I think it's sort of a combination of two things. One is I believe and I hope that we've done a good job of always listening to our audience, and both those that are in our audience and those that have paid us, that are clients of some sort or customers at some point, listen to what else they need and how else we could support them and follow that way. And the Administrator Mastermind kind of came out of that. Like that launched literally the Saturday or Sunday of like after all the states shut down K through 12, because we made a decision, Chad, Ray, and I, we said, we're shutting down all sales things. We're not following up on invoices. We're not doing any of that. We need to go to 100% support mode. And Ray's like, I want to go live 5 days a week. Boom. We started going live 5 days a week. And that was the birth of all that stuff. And Chad, I think it was Chad, was like, we need to create a space for like those that are administrators that are connected to us to like get through this, because this is about to be crazy. And that sort of started the Administrative Mastermind, right? And then you talk about like the leading into the Educreator Club, which we can talk about more, right? And that actually started with our Edupreneur, our mastermind that's built in there, which you were a founding member of. And that came out of us having conversations in the Administrator Mastermind that went other ways. And then we're like, oh, let's start having it over here on Clubhouse for a little bit. And then eventually he's like, hey, can we organize this a little bit? And then it's just organically launched. And that was there was a group of 4 or 5, I think, of us and then I was like, hey, we'll do this if you help me build it. And you helped us build it. And then now it's become more than that. So I think it's a combination of that, of constantly listening. Okay, what can we do, right? Even when I think about like our strategic plan and our 360 PD model and stuff, like that all came from people, our clients, saying, hey, can you do this though? Like, can you help us with that? And we're like, well, yeah, this is how we would. And then we formed that, right? If you think about the name change came, and a lot of these other things too, from bringing awesome people into our world, right? Chad and I started the company together, but like when Ray came in, she came in with a different mindset than us, because we were the grid method. That's what it was. But she came in and we were already sort of doing some other stuff because people had asked us, and she brought some passion, some expertise and stuff that were like, oh, now we can do other stuff too. And it became really fuzzy of like, well, wait a minute, what's the grid method? Because you're working with me on standards-based grading, or you're working with me on our teachers on assessment. Like, we don't even understand what your title of your company is. And it was Ray and someone else at the time that were like pushing, like, we need to like rebrand this. It doesn't make sense anymore. And that's where it eventually came through. And then their passions and stuff like that, right? The podcast was Ray and I initially, like really early on, was Ray and I wanting to do the podcast and saying, hey, we're going to take this thing on. Started the Teach Better podcast, which has obviously evolved a lot, but led eventually into the podcast network and all that stuff. The podcast network was Josh saying, me like sort of mentioning it, and then Josh saying that's something I've always wanted to do, and then letting them run, right? So it's a combination of trying to always listen to the folks that we're trying to serve, and then also leaning into the awesomeness of the people that are connected to us in any way or another, right? The Administrator Mastermind grew. You mentioned Dave Schmitto. We gotta give a shout out to Schmitto. Mm-hmm. Like that, he was such a big part of that thing kind of growing into what it then has evolved into more and more and stuff. And so it's just leaning into that. So to lean into your audience and lean into the folks that you are connected to, whether they're like quote unquote team members or partners, or just people that you know from a mastermind or whatever it might be. And I think we've done that pretty well.
Oh, you've definitely done that extremely well. In fact, I would take it a step further, and I know we've talked about this in our MBA group, that creation of community, and what I think you guys have done so very well, not just with the full structure with Circle and the Educreator Club, that type of thing, but you have just genuinely created a community of people who just love Teach Better. Charlie Peck and I were big shout out to Charlie Peck. We were at a conference together in Virginia earlier this year. And within the app, somebody who I had actually met at Teach Better 22 put a post in there and said, hey, anybody who's connected to Teach Better, let's all meet up on such and such evening. And we did. And there were, a handful of us in Virginia, hanging out together that had a connection through Teach Better. So talk a little bit about that intentionality that goes into developing that community. It's not something that happens overnight. I know that. And I think that's something sometimes people will make a mistake. They'll open a Facebook group and say, okay, here we go. I'm going to create a community, and then nothing. So talk
Yeah.
about how that process works.
Yeah, I think a community in there's a lot of ways. Community is a big thing right now, as what a community is, meaning like sort of what we have our creator club, like on the community app specifically. But community in general is can be anything, right? It's like, to your point, anyone who's connected to your brand in any way that becomes part of that community. I think for us, like we've put it is definitely not overnight. That's a lot of time. One thing I was, you talking about the Facebook group. I'm thinking about when we first launched our Teach Better Team Facebook group, which was initially like a grid method support group, is what it was meant to be. And then it grew, obviously, as we grew. And right now, today, it sort of manages itself in the sense that we have some people that have been tapped as like moderators and stuff. But like if someone posts something that's not good in there, that's either violation of terms or salesy, because we don't let any sales in there, I won't see it before someone else who's not a member of our paid team takes care of it, because it's just grown into such a strong community, and that's what they're there for. But I think about the first at least 3, 4 years that we had that was a huge focus of ours, to have that engagement, to always make sure that anyone posted in there got feedback, got support, felt that love all the time. Because it takes a lot to do that. And that goes in general, right? The way you respond to any kind of interaction on social media, the way you respond to people when you meet them in person, all that type of stuff. I think, for me, one of the things that I've always pushed and the team has taken and run with in so many awesome ways is I've always I used to joke, like, I'm not trying to build a education consultant firm. I want us to build a brand. And I used to joke that I want to build a brand that's so powerful that in 5 years, if we wanted to sell tennis shoes, people would buy them because they knew that they must help them teach better. Now, I don't joke about that anymore, because Chad's obsession on running shoes is the fact that he would probably figure out how to make that actually legit happen. But like the purpose being, like, we don't know how the industry is going to change. We've seen a lot of changes over the last several years, a lot of changes that are likely going to come even more so with just legislation, AI, all that type of stuff. For us, it's like, the way we generate revenue right now may not look the same. It doesn't look the same now as it did 9 years ago. And it might not look the same 2 years from now or 5 years from now. But if we can build a brand, and we've chosen to build that through the power of community, then it won't matter what it needs to look like, because the folks that come into our community know that they're supported and they're loved. There just might be a different way in which if there ever is, what those transactions look like and how we do that thing. And I think whether on a little scale, a small scale, or a huge scale, focusing on that is crucial, because your product might be amazing, but if they don't feel that warm feeling, that connection, that support, that love when they think about your brand, or they hear your name, or they see your logo, or they visit your website, or they listen to your podcast, then you are losing that strength that I think is our biggest strength, which is the fact that there's people who care about our brand and care about what we do. Even if they've never paid us a dime, they care about it. And that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, I mentioned this from the very top of the show. I've learned a lot from you in the last several years, and maybe more than anything, it's the importance of building that brand. And that's certainly something I think we've done here with Road to Awesome, just really leaning into building the brand. It's not about leadership coaching. It's not about, publication books, or it's not just about speaking. It's about leaning in and supporting people and helping them be the best they can be. And in some cases, yeah, those are people who haven't paid us a dime. And in some cases, it's some people who've been wonderful, wonderful clients of ours and partners of ours. So I want to talk about the Educator Club, the Creator Club, just real briefly before I get to the question I ask everybody here on the show. You mentioned it earlier. I mean, you talked about, the brief little stretch of time where we would hang out on Clubhouse and talk a little bit about being an edupreneur. And well, I'll spare everybody the big long story of me disagreeing with you on email marketing and how now we use email marketing and have somebody who specifically does that for us. But from that point to where you are now, certainly that EDUcreator Club has just really evolved. Just share a little bit of what the different offerings are that are within that space, because I think there's probably some people who are going to be like, man, I got to check this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of go through that. We essentially have like, if you think of them as tiers or levels, however you want to think it, 3 tiers of the community itself, right? And it's all built on and managed on an app called Circle, which is a platform built for exclusive private communities like this. So essentially, it's kind of like our own little Facebook, if you will, that is there. And the difference is there's no algorithm, and there's no you don't have people that aren't interested. It's all like-minded people that are connected by whatever the theme of that community is. And we have basically 3 different levels. So you have the base level of the EDUcreator Club community, which is the community. It's the being to go in, and there's different spaces where you can post questions, or looking for tools, or asking for help or feedback, or sharing value, things of that nature. We do for the most part monthly, sometimes every other month, live webinar sessions or training sessions or special guests. We do office hours and stuff. And as a member of the community, you get free access to that, but you also get free access to the recordings as well. We do have stuff planned down the road for some courses in there and other exclusive content as well. So that's sort of your base level offering there. That's for someone who is either already creating things, or maybe thinking about what we talked earlier about, someone who's maybe thinking they might have something to share and wants to learn, like, let me learn the basics of email marketing, or the basics of how I should be doing this short form video thing that they talked about, whatever it might be. This is a community where you can come and learn those things, connect with people, collaborate, and have a place to lean into when you need help with that, whether you're launching a podcast or starting a blog or writing a book, or if you've already got something that's actually fully fledged and like cruising. Even if you're already making money, that might be a good fit for you. If the next level up is the Edupreneur Mastermind, which actually is we've actually kind of quietly renamed the Educreator Club Mastermind, because it's part of that community. Initially wasn't, but that's for folks who we do refer to them as Edupreneurs, meaning that you kind of like, you see yourself more as trying to just grow something, trying to monetize, trying to build something, right? You might be in the Educreator Club, the community. You just want an outlet for creativity. You may be like, I don't ever want to monetize this. I don't want to deal with that at all. And that's fine. The mastermind is more for folks who are like, I want to monetize this. I don't necessarily need to or want to leave the classroom. It's a side hustle, or maybe I do have a goal of doing that, but I want a little more, right? So that comes with it, some exclusive space. And then we also meet once a week on Zoom, and we have a mastermind meeting. And then the top level there is what we call our MBA program, which is where you are, Darrin, as well as you mentioned, like Charlie. And we have an awesome group there. That's a little higher level for the folks that have been doing it for a little while, have been seeing success, but want a little more. We have a higher level of accountability there. There's a higher level of expectation there. We're getting into different topics and different ideas. We're talking a little less about how do I make money, and more about how do I actually grow this thing? How do I increase this to something that's bigger than what it is right now? So kind of 3 levels, and you can start wherever you want and move around however you need as well. And it's all over at teachbetter.com/educreator. So it's EDUcreator, and then that'll show you all those different options and stuff. So appreciate you bringing that up, though.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, again, the Educreator Club, even before it was called that, has been something that's really helped us in, finding the success that we are having with Road to Awesome. So yeah, I definitely want to share that with everybody, because I think there's just so many great things. And not only that, there's a lot of great people within that group that, you mentioned the MBA group, our group, man, just the accountability that we feel to each other, the camaraderie that we feel with each other. I mentioned Charlie Peck at the time we're recording this. Charlie and I were just together at a conference in Nashville with another original member of the Educreator Mastermind, Debbie Tannenbaum. And, Charlie wasn't speaking yet at the time. She came and shot some video of my speaking piece. And I think she went back in and did some for Debbie. And then, of course, she did her own piece and that kind of thing. Just that camaraderie and that mutual support, but also pushing each other to the next level in the right ways, I think has just been extremely beneficial. So, man, we could talk about this stuff all day, but we've reached that point where I'm going to ask you the same question that I ask everybody here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast. So it's your turn in the hot seat, Jeff Gargas. What are you doing to lean into leadership?
I was thinking about this because I know that you ask everyone this, and I'm like, what can I say profound? And then I've just been reflecting and doing whatever, a lot of, internal stuff. Recently, I said, I think what I'm leaning into now as a way of leaning into leadership is I'm leaning into mistakes. What I mean by that is I think I've always been pretty good at saying, hey, I'm sorry, I messed up. I apologize. I'm an idiot, whatever, like going through that. But leaning in, meaning how can I really reflect on what happened, good, bad, ugly, whatever, the mistakes, whether big or small, it doesn't matter. Whether it's just like, oh, we should have used different language there, or if it's like, oh, I made a big mistake and I hurt someone's feelings or something like that. Reflecting and going like, okay, how do I actually, instead of just going, man, that sucked, but I'm glad I said, I'm sorry, they forgave me, let's move on with life. Going back, not in a way of like reintroducing the trauma or the emotion, but going back and go, okay, how do I take what was an uncomfortable thing, what was a bad thing, whatever, and how do I truly learn from that? How do I extract whatever lesson I can from that now, instead of what I feel I've done in my life is wait 20 years until I reflect back and go, oh yeah, I remember that from then.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a way that it's difficult. It's takes a lot of like internal work, and I've read about it and been working on it and stuff. But I think I'm really leaning into, if I can kind of say it that way, leaning into mistakes in order to lean myself into leadership and being a better leader for those that I have the privilege and honor to be in some sort of leadership role with.
That's outstanding, man. I love that answer so very much. I think that the best leaders are the ones who are willing to be vulnerable, the ones who are willing to put themselves out there and to admit when they're wrong, not just simply hey, my bad, but how can I make this better? How can I continue to improve as an individual? So I really do value that answer. Man, people are going to want to check out all things Jeff Gargas. They're going to want to check out all things Teach Better if they're not already doing so. What's the best way for people to get connected with you?
Best way is over at the website teachbetter.com. Me personally on X, I'm at Jeff Gargas, Gargas. Same on TikTok. On Instagram, you got to add underscore Jeff Gargas because other Jeff Gargas stole it. But teachbetter.com is where all of the stuff is about the team, and there's a way to then connect to all of us there. You can find out about the administrator mastermind, about the free stuff we have over there, about the courses, about the Educator Club, anything you need over at teachbetter.com.
Yeah, outstanding stuff, man. I really appreciate that. Folks, if you have any questions about what you heard in today's episode, reach out to Jeff, reach out to me. Happy to have that conversation and share any and all things. If you have an idea, if you think there's something that you've got that can help somebody solve a problem, like Jeff said, you probably do have something there. So put it out there, start building that content, reach out, get connected with somebody, get a little bit of support. You never know where it's going to go. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast.
Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, there you go, folks, man. What an awesome conversation with Jeff Gargas. Again, I really appreciate Jeff joining me here on the show. Make sure you check out allthingsteachbetter.com. I've got a ton of links down there in the show notes for you to go and check out, and make sure you get connected with Jeff and the Teach Better team. Man, the work they do is just really powerful. It's really awesome, and make sure that you're spending a little bit of time with them. And now it's time for a pep talk. This week's pep talk takes me back to where I started the week. I started the week in Eureka, Nevada with my friends at Eureka County School District. I was working with the leadership team, and at a point in time, I had kind of stepped away from the group, and I found myself on the balcony of their gymnasium. Now, if you've been a listener and a watcher of the podcast for a while, if you've read my book, Road to Awesome, The Journey of a Leader, you know what balconies mean to me. The balcony is that space where you can go and kind of step up out of the fray, check in on yourself, and really evaluate, are you doing the things that you say you're doing? Are you really staying focused on the work that truly matters? Or are you getting yourself too lost in the weeds and not getting to the work that really makes an impact? Well, as I stood on this balcony, folks, I found myself reflecting on just exactly that. Am I doing the work that I want to be doing? Am I making sure that I am pouring into the right people? Am I making sure that I'm holding myself to the expectations I have of myself as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a coach, as a speaker, as an author, and as a publisher? And I found myself really just kind of taking stock in various different areas. And it was very recharging for me. It was great to have that opportunity to kind of in my mind's eye, take a look down on the floor and position the things that I find to be really important, the things that I hold in high regard in my work, to have the opportunity to just take a step, take a breath and say, you know what, am I really doing what I think I'm doing? Am I really following through on what matters? Now, I share this with you for this reason. You're about to launch into your new school year, and you are going to be in the fray really fast, right? You know what's going to happen. You're going to start school on, let's say, August 14th, and on August 15th, the fur will fly, things will get crazy, and before you know it, it'll be November 4th, right? And you'll be looking around going, oh my gosh, what happened, right? I want to challenge you today to go find that space before it all gets going, before it all gets crazy. Find that space for you. For me, it's a balcony, but maybe for you, it's some other space. But find a space that tells you when you're in the space, here is where I check in on myself. Here's where I step up onto the balcony and I take a look, and am I really staying focused on the work that truly matters? Folks, that's going to be the thing that's going to help you be successful during the course of the year. If you're not checking in on yourself, you're going to be lost in the weeds. And before you know it, it's going to be May. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, what happened to my school year? Find that space, put it on your calendar, dedicate the time so that you are holding yourself accountable for checking in and making sure that you're working on the work that matters. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning Into Leadership podcast, folks. Get out there. Have a road to awesome week.